Hello, dear friends. We're with the Kabbalist, Dr. Michael Laitman. Hello, everyone. There are more and more numbers talking about the what numbers? Numbers about how many people will starve, and the numbers are gigantic. No one has any solution, any plan. The World Food Program named the number 265 million people will suffer from hunger. I think that they're going to be like 4 billion. So you're adding a few more billions. Then everything that it says, these say no, those say yes, these add, those subtract. One way or another, everyone's standing, not knowing what to do, perplexed. What are we going to do? How do you solve this problem? You added a few more billions. So, is it possible to solve this problem? No. No. Within the boundaries of our egoistic nature and with what we did with the world and ourselves, it's impossible to solve the problem. Okay, what now? What now? There'll be these kinds of civil waves that the only thing left to do is to kill each other. Civil turmoil. There will be cannibalism and whatnot. I'm not talking about tomorrow, but the day after, very possible. Meaning in the next stage. I don't know what to ask about this. Nothing to ask about. We're already there. We pushed everyone toward egoistic development, and we have no idea how to develop in any other way, and humanity has to decrease up to the state where it will be able to provide for itself. We made it so that we can feed 1 billion people for nothing, meaning we can feed billions of people. Of course, the planet can feed 20 and 40 billion people. But, and there's lots of things that are made and thrown away in terms of food. To throw away, yes, but to divide, no. That we can't do. Meaning, these waves or hunger will bring us to a point where we'll take from those who have and give it to those that don't. Yeah, there will be different organizations that will simply destroy everything. Did you see how locust eats everything? It'll be the same, only with people. Meaning they'll go, loot, destroy shops, factories. What, you didn't have something like that in Russia? Well, we saw it in the United States now. Yeah, but there they didn't loot because of hunger. They looted Armani and, rich shops. Okay, what does nature want if it is pushing us? Nature wants for us to correct it. For us to make it so that everyone will have. Everyone will have equally. For everyone to have. Equally or not, that's, something else. It's a matter of how you divide society, who gets what, that's accounting. But there was such an experiment to give everyone what they need. We went through that experiment, but it didn't work out in the USSR. What does nature want of us? It's pushing us toward what? There are going to be wars, people are going to kill each other, there will be hunger, what? What will we get? Nothing. Within the boundaries of our egoistic psychology, within the boundaries of our egoistic society, our enlightened, developed society, we will not be able to achieve anything as a human society. We'll simply drive into things that no one will know what to do. And what's the solution? There is no solution. Because how can you go against nature? Okay, we'll give out, fine. And what then? Who's going to work? Who's going to organize? Who's going to give out? These are all of these altruistic eruptions come very quickly to an end, and this will be covered by bloodshed. So it's not a kind of a basic income, but a basic food income, to have something for today, maybe for tomorrow. But for this, you need very serious organization, furthermore, international organization, because no government can provide for itself nowadays. So there has to be a very rational system of production, of dissemination, of clothing, of, to provide people with everything that they need. And people today, there are many things that they don't have, but they simply don't have the means. So they're not aspiring for it. They understand this is what I have, and probably this is how it's supposed to be. But when the law is breached, then I'm no longer talking in terms of is it right or not. I'm demanding, why does he have and I don't? They say he's rich. I want to be rich too. What does it mean when the law is breached? When we see that within the boundaries of our egoistic society, laws are no longer in effect. When the waves of hunger begin, why does he have and I don't? Yeah, and you can't say anything to calm me down. You're all the time talking about a dead end, to come out of this dead end, to some kind of solution. We have to act in advance. Okay, we're late already. You mean to start acting now? Yeah, now in advance. So that today, while people still have different sources of how to fulfill themselves, different ways of how to fulfill themselves, that it will be possible to explain all of this to them, to warn them about what's coming. Those people that are going to starve or governments, everyone's going to be miserable. Here we're headed toward a state where, first of all, they're going to hang governments. First of all, they're going to kill, those that are rich and in power. So you have to tell everyone about it. So were this fear were people to feel that fear? Those that are starving, those that will kill later, were they to feel this fear, they'd immediately start thinking about what to do. Well, first of all, he would have arranged for himself how to buy some island in the Pacific. Yeah, it's very popular. Yeah, and build some castle there, as far from viruses as possible, from the common folk, but they'll be found there too. Of course. First of all, viruses are everywhere, and that's very interesting. Where there's complete no connection, where a person has no external connections, still it appears. It's like it doesn't pass from person to person, but like there comes a time the virus awakens from within the person starting to eat us. That's a separate. It comes from our ego. And therefore it awakens in each of us. Does the ego give birth to it? Gives birth to it. It doesn't give birth to it from scratch. A virus is a special informative data that comes alive. A special informative data that comes alive. It's like DNA, it's like information. And therefore, no one can hide from it. Back 100 years ago, the socialistic revolutions where people thought that they may be saved somehow. So you're saying that everyone's going to be miserable. Everyone. Because under the law of nature, we have to reach a general equality. Okay, bring us out of the crisis. If this is something that we already understand, if I'm frightened, what do I have to do? You have to learn how to teach others, how to disseminate among everyone the state that we're in, and a state that we have to come to. And hopefully without any bloodshed, to move from this state to that state. What does a person have to know? How to build the next formation, a non-egoistic one, above the ego. If he'll more or less depict it, it'll be much easier to talk to him. It'll be really possible to build this formation with him. So first a person has to understand that he's an egoist, that it's all because of that. Well, as a result, it's not that much of a problem to understand this today as it was in the past, because we already see who we are. Gradually, nowadays, in a relatively short period of time, several months, and if not months, then several years, but nature will bear it. Once we'll start engaging in our reforming, rebuilding of society, it'll give us time, it'll wait. So you think that were we now to start to think about these things, prepare ourselves for this horror that's awaiting us, then nature would have, moved away a bit. Would have, yeah. It's all a correction. It's all healing. So it would have moved away. Of course, because by this we're correctly interfering in healing our ego, in healing ourselves from the ego. Actually, ahead of us there is a simple task: to cure ourselves of the ego, to rise above it. In and of itself, the ego isn't bad, only we have to know how to correctly work with it, not from within it, but above it. That's it. So, if we start preparing ourselves for that, and to correctly prepare the masses for it, then actually by that we are already on the path of correction, and then from nature we'll see no problems. I'm all the time asking this question: who has to hear you? These worldwide organizations. Actually, everyone has to hear me. Because if it will not be heard by everyone, then it's going to be a problem. Everyone has to participate. Someone hears, someone tells it to others, someone changes his life accordingly, and so on. But the main thing is for us to understand that to just sit around and to somehow prepare ourselves for this bad future, that's impossible. We're already with one foot, we stepped on the escalator that is taking us up toward that better future. There will be no turns, like in history, there are always histories, suddenly it brought in capitalism, this, that. I don't know what could happen on the way. Could be many more viruses, could be other problems. Could be a world war. Everything could happen. But still, it'll transport us forward. And so that there will be no suffering, that depends on us. The amount of suffering and what we have to experience depends on us. If we will correctly develop and feel what we have to do, how are we supposed to be, then even our inner state of readiness for it, to accept it, that's the most important thing. And the rest, nature will do with us in a bad or in a good way. and will lead us to it for sure. For sure. It's a part of nature. Toward what? Toward a point where we will find ourselves in a society of equally connected, willingly equally connected, where people will be equally connected in a good and nice way, and the only thing that we'll be concerned with is how to exist correctly between us. And this is something that we have to publicize to everyone, for everyone to understand that this is a basic need. This is already something that it exists in nature already. It's nature's plan. We have to correct the ego, and we can correct it in several ways, in a good way or in a bad way. So, it is in our ability, out of this bad way that occurs instinctively, by way of evolution, it is possible to advance in a good way, consciously, meaning willingly taking part in this development. So it won't be nature that's breaking us and we'll try to change, but that we ourselves will want to do it and we'll look for ways of how is it better to change. Last question. You, personally, how do you feel yourself now? Do you feel anxious? Are you pushing yourself? Do you feel tormented that you can't? I somehow overcame that period where I really wanted it and I felt that it's necessary and quickly. And today I still feel this need, but is already balanced by what's happening in nature. All of the coronavirus and the different problems, crises that already went by, in my eyes, they all form a very straight line that eventually has to lead us to correction, to correct our ego. So I wouldn't say that today I have some kind of an awakening to speed things up, to do something, to act, yes. But I'm not crossed with nature for the way it's handling it. I'm content, in short, with nature. Yeah? You always said that humanity will maybe change after the pandemic, maybe something will happen. In Peking, for example, the government wants to give out $1.7 billion to the population in order to increase, in order to push people to go shopping. Well, that's in order to soften the atmosphere. And also in Japan, was a lot about tourism. Last year there were 32 million tourists that came to Japan, and now there's this rule that if someone comes to Japan, half of his trip is paid for by the Japanese government. So, how to put this? This action of governments, will it lead to something? No, it's just to soften the atmosphere a bit. It's so that there won't be such a deep plunge, because what can you do? But they're not even thinking in the direction that people will live only according, even if they come to that. What do you do now? The government has enough money, the money that it prints, and the army that protects the government. A government has the army and money. And on the other side, They're the people. So either you give it money or you suppress it by the army. First of all, let's give out a few billions. So to shut the people up a bit. Yeah, but of course it doesn't correct anything. Afterwards, they hope that the virus will pass, that things are going to be different. They can't offer anything new, governments. They have no alternative in their head. How to, some kind of replacement for the egoistic society that all trade and the market and everything else is based on. So they think that after the virus, things will go back to how they were. Of course. Was it ever any different? You can't show me that it was different ever. And therefore, naturally, that is the only way they'll develop. Where did you see any other laws? Well, there were some attempts. We talked about it after tremendous suffering. There were NATO, the UN. It's all in order to calm down the ruling. It's in order to provide for the ruling elites. So when we call out to humanity to change, it does go. Okay, so if nothing changes, again, people will start going shopping. No, where will they have money from? Well, they'll print money or give it out, governments. Suppose this is how it's going to be. Things are going to go back to how they were. What's going to happen then? What will we come to? Viruses? New viruses. Of course. Undoubtedly. There's no way back. No. Everything's going forward. We are in the generation of the correction of human nature. What should wise governments, what should have they done? There can't be any wise person in terms of how you put it that can foresee what's going to happen. There is no such person that can see ahead. I talked to many of them. They're incapable of understanding you because for this you have to rise above human nature. And to the contrary, they're sitting inside of it. This is why they became rulers. The most egoistic, the most immersed, dipped in ego. They reach these high positions. They're managers, ministers, prime ministers. So they can't grasp this new era. No. And even if there'll come some kind of a revolutionary, then he'll be even a greater egoist and will follow the egoistic path. Of course. So we're at a dead end. True. Only one way out. Education. Education. And we have to do it. I don't even know what to ask. Nothing to ask. Everything's fine here. We came to a state where this kind of party or movement that will propagate the correct kind of society that exists above the ego, it has the right to exist. We can legislate this. So you mean that an organization or a movement that will be in favor of man understanding that there is a way of how to develop above the ego and that it's possible to learn how to do this, and let's do it. Let's try and do it this way for ourselves and humanity. Let's see how much nature can help us in this regard. And this movement will not be quenched. It's possible to give it, the government can give it green light, of course, and This is the time that they can give green light. It's not about the green light, but to simply allow for this organization to exist. And it's possible to get enough mandates for it to exist as a party and even a broader movement. It's possible. No one will be able to forbid it because it's legit, actually. There's nothing that undermines the structure, the governmental structure, or it's not something threatening for that egoistic. No, it's theoretical. And what is that? What about the rightists? They also propagate their way of living close to what we're talking about. There were the kibbutzes within the boundaries of an egoistic government. But you're talking about nature here, about our nature. So every party, every movement have their own foundation, theoretical basis. You can even say spiritual. Maybe we're now really on the verge of a completely new era, a completely new time of revelation. I think that we have to do all of these things, only have to formulate it correctly and to gradually offer it to the masses. At least for them to know what are we talking about here, because they're thinking that we're, walking in the clouds, but we're to the contrary. We're going from the ground up, out of the ego, meaning that we can't remain in it anymore, and how do we rise above it? How would you call this movement? New movement?
Не знаю.
I don't know.
Не знаю.
I don't know. But it's a movement that's above the ego with the goal of bringing man to his new next level of development. Who would you draw to this? I have no idea who is it possible to draw to this. Usually, drawn are those who are discontent with their existence, but it's, they'll be with you only till the next corner, and then they leave you, in the best case, or they corrupt you. So you have to choose those that are, I think only that general education for the entire population and integral education for an integral society. Do you need money for that, or just consent in order to organize the system, even though that practically we have it, but in order to extend it, in order to bring it to society, or even to a worldwide society? For this you need means, but I don't think that these are big means. I think that the entire problem is we ourselves. You want to say that the way out, there could be only one way out. There is no other way out. I don't see any other way out. This virus won't let us go. It'll let us go only in one case. If we substitute it by the correct education of humanity, then our inner organization of each of us and between us will create the conditions in which the virus will no longer affect us, and only that way. Otherwise, instead of it, there'll be other viruses. It's all you can't correct it, you can't change it. So, that's what's ahead. And I'm happy that we came to this. And what's next? I hope that another month or two, and finally, our friends, our students, all those that are with us, that they'll understand that we have to advance. Now, whatever I say, they say yes, but they don't move. But I think that there will come a time where they will feel that they're really burning on the inside, and then they'll have to somehow start realizing themselves. Okay.
Другая совершенно новость. Как-то мы разбирали, но сейчас она все время появляется. Вот
NASA determined that 98% of the children are born geniuses. And it says, but school makes them average idiots. There were these researchers, they took children and they tested them for who's a genius. And suddenly they found out that 98% of the children, you could call them geniuses. People said, look, you drew the wrong conclusions, incorrect experiments. After 5 years, they did a new experiment with the same children, and the result was, it was 98%, and now they're only, at the age of 10, only 30% were geniuses. After 5 years, another experiment, and the number decreased to 12%. Those same children at the age of 15, that 98% were geniuses, now only 12% of those children remain geniuses. Now they tested grown-ups, and they found out that only 2% meet the criteria for being a genius. So they drew a conclusion that the process that a person goes through, school, university, things that are supposed to add to your IQ, they kill that child who's born a genius. Of course. You're saying, of course. But for them, it's shocking. I felt it on myself, how school's breaking me completely. How they're forcing me to study in one way and tell things in another way and think in a third way. I feel it on myself today, how my parents pushed me, so school pressured. Can you imagine? It's the entire system of education that we have built. It's to our detriment, turns out. Of course. Can you explain that? Because it's based on our need to put our small, sensitive ego into some kind of framework and do what they want. To break a child. Yeah, they're not in favor of developing him freely. And why to develop him this way at all? Why to develop children this way? What do we need to inflate a child with such information? It's not even information, it's knowledge. Sorry, I don't think that it's knowledge. The right names for it isn't knowledge. What's being shoved into him? Ways of thinking, schabloons in which to think, one way and not another. And by this we, of course, distort the children. How should we raise a child? We went through this at school. When we sit together, talk, don't sit on the study bench at school. What for? So where should we study? Sit on your butt. That's it. That's enough. But not at school. And don't look at your teacher. Not look at your teacher and not to listen to what he tells you to do? Yeah? By no means. How then? What? To talk freely, calmly, without any theme, without any nothing. Only in a free kind of style, talk, a group of people of different ages, maybe even, to talk about different topics, and this is how we'll learn from each other, developing new subjects, new opportunities. When I listen to others, I start thinking, how will I? It's a completely different form of development. And you think that it's possible to study math and languages and things, if it's necessary. all that we've learned, is it necessary? I doubt it. So you think that what's necessary to develop is what's necessary for life. What is necessary for life? How to get dressed.
Пропитать себя.
How to feed ourselves.
Общаться.
Общаться это
How to interact.
не надо никакой особой науки. И никакие культуры, никакие
For this, you don't need any special science or culture or theater or nothing.
простое общение между собой.
Simple interaction between people. Everything else is done artificially, egoistically, for our egoistic demands that only elevate us
Друг над другом.
as egoists above each other. So school, universities, it was all an egoistic kind of pressure on us. In front of our eyes, in the past few hundreds of years, it developed for us to be able to provide, in order to live off each other. I see. Science and art and everything there is only in order to live off each other. Either we're talking about material goods, money, or whatever, or in the form of being respected and pride. And if we could simply sit under a tree, talk, develop from within, what would we come to? What is this leading us to? We would have found possibly a new kind of society. I don't think that it would come easy, but in the relations between us, were we able to correctly analyze our inner awakenings, egoistic awakenings, then we would have been able to somehow balance them. So still there would have been hate, our egoistic nature isn't going anywhere. And how would we quench it? Between us. We'd solve all these problems between us. Yeah? We would have explained this to each other. Were we not tangled in all of these things, then things would have been easier. To be closer to nature, you're saying. The main thing is to directly interact with one another. And then we don't need any technological progress, anything. What does it give us? Well, we're talking virtually. You're saying one studio, I'm in another. What do we need it for? We simply need to somehow compensate for the distance between us. We talk in a different key, internally, even without words. Yeah, through a different channel. Interconnection between us. This is what we should have built our entire education on. Yeah, there's no way back now. Now we have to go forward and to adjust things, re-educate. How would you now change universities, schools, if you could, in whatever way you want? I don't know how to do it now. But we at least see that schools, we don't know about universities, but schools, they're no longer valid. Universities will see that in the near future. And that now we're moving into virtual relations that will work from home. It's a result of what? Everything is coming to a point where we reject our previous attitude toward the world, toward life, towards progress, where we have exploited others. I think that our attitude toward ourselves as small egoistic beings will become ever clearer. It'll appear in the eyes of it will appear to people, and they'll have to change themselves.
этого мира в таком виде.
They'll have to
Когда будет вот гениальность, вот
stop being this
гениальность
way.
человека.
And what will a person's genius will be about?
Внутренний
Complete inner and external integration, inclusion. And this is a genius.
Вот если
Yes.
туда было направлено все образование, то гениальность бы сохранялась, да, и увеличилась.
And so this way, a person would be more. Thank you, Rav. All the best.